Hello, it is a question time. I recently ran a session around building engagement and a culture of engagement through intentional conversations. And off the back of that particular session, I had someone reach out to me and say, Cliff, I've been thinking a lot about this session and what we were talking about. And I'm really keen to make it happen. However, what happens if you are in a toxic culture and the root of that toxicity is your leader, all right, your direct manager? How do you handle that scenario? And I know that this particular person is not the only one facing this. There are many people out there who want to have a positive impact on their culture, but their manager is a root cause of some of the issues that they face. So how do you deal with that particular scenario and situation? The first thing to remember is that your manager and leader, if they are a poor leader, they're not doing it intentionally, all right? The vast majority of the cases, those people don't wake up and go, how do I erode the culture of my organization today? How do I go in and be a bad leader and disengage my staff? The reality is that they are likely unaware of the impact of their behavior. Whether it's because they haven't been trained, whether it's because they're under too much pressure, whether it's because they've had poor role models in the past, the majority of them just aren't aware of what they're doing and the impact that it's having. And I'll often say that when people might have the best intent, but their impact is different from the intent that they have, well, they will generally initiate some sort of change in order to align the two, all right? And so if you want to have influence in your team and trying to have a positive impact on your culture, you need to start with recognizing that your manager is probably not a bad person. They're just unaware, and you need to be able to help them become aware of what they might be able to do differently. Now, there are bad people out there. There are people who, for whatever reason, and out of contempt, are trying to harm, whether it's people or whether it's the organization, and whether they are just fundamentally narcissistic and have a personality disorder, you're not going to be able to change those people. If you've got organizational support at a higher level, then I encourage you to access that and see if you can get some support in order to deal with that situation. But if that's not available for you, then I would encourage you to leave. Find a different place to work where you have good managers. There's never been more opportunity for you to do so now. But if you are sitting there and you are sort of saying, well, hey, this person's not a bad person, they're just unaware, then I encourage you to have a crack at seeing if you can be a positive influence in that workplace. Now, the way that you would do that, I would encourage you to adopt almost a guerrilla warfare approach. And by that I mean, a conventional tactics in warfare is you kind of identify the enemy and then you approach head on and attack them. And if you try to do this in your workplace and you're trying to address your leader and their poor leadership directly, and you say, hey, you're a bad leader, you need to change, it's not going to end well for you, all right? You're going to come up with against some psychological reactants. They're going to push back and resist, and they're going to have the weight of the organization behind them. They have the authority that you don't have. You're going to come off second best. So it's probably not a good idea. My encouragement to you is to adopt a guerrilla warfare tactic, which is infiltrate and then influence. Okay, infiltrate and then influence. And what I mean by that is, by infiltrating, it's gain your leader's trust, all right, and then try and influence them. So now this is all for the benefit, right? It's for their benefit as much as it is for yours, for your teams. It's not being sneaky in that sense, but what you're doing is being really intentional and addressing things from the side, all right, rather than head on. So what does that actually look like? Well, I reckon it's probably a good place to start is to have a bit of a conversation around being on their side. Now remember, leadership it's done by 1,000 conversations, all right? And no conversation happens in isolation. And every conversation you have should be laying the foundation for the next conversation. Now, in this case, you're not going to have one conversation with your manager and transform them into an amazing leader. You're not going to have one conversation and completely turn around a toxic culture. But over time, you can have a number of different conversations, increase your influence and have a positive impact. So the first conversation, I reckon, is getting on side with your leader. And it's simply having a conversation saying, hey, I want to help you, have the best workplace here. And to do that, I'd love to, have a bit of a chat around how I can support you. And then ask them a bunch of questions, gather the information. And that's really the key to this first conversation is gather the information. And you might ask questions like, what is it that keeps you up at night? What is it about our team that you think most about? Uncover what are their priorities in the workplace. What does good look like for them when it comes to the culture? What does good look like? What does great look like? Are they driven by, simply profits? Is it performance? Is it a whole lot of other different things, right? You can't tailor your approach until you know what those things are. I talk about the underlying principle of influence being frame your request as a contribution to their priorities. And you can't do that unless you understand your manager and leader's priorities. You might also say, well, hey, what does great culture look like? Or how do I get the most out of working alongside you as a leader? How do I get the most out of your leadership? These are all great questions that will make the leader stop and think and also feel like you are there to support them, like you're on their side. And once you've kind of got a whole lot of information like that, then maybe sort of say, well, hey, thanks for that. Well, do you mind if I kind of sit and have a think about that and see if I can come up with some ideas to make things better, right? Maybe it might be to make the culture more engaging or, to make you feel supported, to share your workload, but framing it in whatever their priority is. So it might be to build a more engaged culture so we can drive up those profits. Or it might be to, helps other people in the team show a little bit more initiative so we can spread the workload and you're not under pressure. Whatever their priority is, so it's, do you mind if I can spend a bit of time coming up with some ideas to make things better to get whatever their priority is, right? And kind of walk away and leave the conversation, have a bit of a think about it. And then come back and go, well, hey, I've been thinking about this. Do you think it might be beneficial if we? Or do you think it might be a good idea if? Do you think it might be useful if we? And insert whatever your idea is. Now, if we're talking about cultural things, my encouragement would be to really think about what's the conversation that you can have at a team level that would get everybody aligned on expectations and would ultimately kind of allow for accountability. Often accountability is hard because the conversation that gives you the stable foundation to hold people accountable hasn't been had. And that's really around an alignment of expectations and then a commitment to those expectations. So you might say, do you think it might be useful to pull the team together and just talk about what good looks like, what the behaviours that might contribute to that are, and get a bit of a commitment towards some of those behaviours? And you might facilitate, you might equip your manager to facilitate that. But really what we're doing then is you have a group conversation that's public, and you kind of articulate what the behaviors are. Behaviors you want to demonstrate, maybe behaviors you want to avoid, and also the process of dealing with accountability. Like if someone does a poor job or engages in poor behavior, how do we hold people accountable to that? And we get everybody to commit to that publicly, including your manager, right? And then what you've done is you've laid the foundation for not only the team to hold each other accountable, for the manager to hold the team accountable, but also, if you are trusted, for you to hold the manager accountable to those behaviors as well. All right. And that's puts you in a position where you can go, okay, cool. Now, if you then see usually what happens when I help facilitate some of these activities and these conversations, there's an uptick in performance, there's an uptick in morale and those sort of things. And eventually people will start to, slide back into old behaviors, or they might demonstrate some things. But, if you stay on top of that, you make the, good behavior normal, right? And any deviation from that you can correct easily because you've got a commitment from everybody to a higher standard. Now, when your manager potentially demonstrates some of the behaviors that they've committed not to, then hopefully you've got the trust at that point, and you've got the commitment and the foundation to actually hold them accountable. So it might look like this. Hey, and again, don't necessarily go head on. All right, try and do a bit of influence, indirect influence here. And so you might go, hey, first of all, hey, that was a great conversation that we had before. I just want to give you permission to hold me accountable. Like if you see me do something that is contrary to what we just committed to, please make sure that you pull me up straight away about it. And what you find in a lot of cases there is that people or managers will turn around and go, okay, cool, that's awesome. Make sure you pull me up too. It doesn't happen all the time, but a lot of cases, this reciprocity kicks in, and you can come in and then go, they'll give you permission to hold them account. If not, what you might also sort of say, well, hey, you might check in and say, hey, is there anything I've done that's had a negative impact recently? And you might introduce it that way. Or you might ask the question, if you were doing something that had a negative consequence, if you were doing something that potentially disengaged people and you weren't aware of it, would you want to know? Right? Hopefully you've built the relationship here that they say, yeah, I would. All right. And if that's the case, then you go, well, hey, I noticed something recently. Would you like me to share that with you? And 9 times out of 10, when you take this approach and you kind of laid the foundation here, they're going to turn around and say, yeah, please, what is it? And you now have permission to hold them accountable to what you committed to, weeks prior. And hopefully over time, that approach of building the relationship, laying the foundation, having conversation after conversation intentionally over time, you will start to be a trusted ear. You will start to have a greater level of influence, and you will be able to, shift some of the behavior, hopefully that in a way that will build the culture, not erode and reinforce a toxic one. So hopefully that is helpful for you. Now, at the end of the day, if it is a toxic culture and they are a truly toxic leader, my encouragement to you is find somewhere else. Find a better workplace. Don't perpetuate the toxicity. Your leaving may just give other people the courage to leave, which may send a message to the leader and provide the awareness that they need to change, or the awareness to the organisation that they need to deal with a problematic leader. Okay? Not going to tell you what to do, but my encouragement would be to try to infiltrate and then influence. If not, find somewhere else. I hope that's helpful for you. I'm always enjoying answering these questions. So please, if you've got a question about any of the content that I produce or anything in relation to leadership and the psychology of leadership and people at work, I'd love to answer them. Send them through. Until next time, lead well.